Welcome to Unraveling Midlife. I'm your host, Sarah Spence. Thanks for joining me as I explore my own astrological midlife by speaking with all sorts of inspiring people about their life and work. If you're new to the show, welcome. At the end of each episode, I share a track of my original music, and there's more information about my guest as well as the music in the show notes. Unraveling Midlife. It's all to do with astrological midlife, relating to Western astrology transits that run from the mid-30s to the mid-40s for everyone. Each of the main midlife transits have an overall theme, though details vary by generation and by individual. It directly corresponds to the term midlife crisis, though I like to call it the midlife unraveling, relating to Brené Brown's excellent essay. So far, this podcast has been me unraveling my time with these astrology transits and talking with others who have gone through them or are within them, honouring the passage of moving through these interesting times of shake-up. Today's guest is Mada Dalian. She is many things, including a teacher who helps others to release deeply held ingrained beliefs and thought forms through her Self-healing Dalian Method, making it accessible for us to heal ourselves. Mada is an award-winning author of 2 books that you'll hear us discuss over the course of the next months. Mada has generously agreed to guest on a series of episodes, so today's is just starting to set the scene. I found a great write-up about Mada on her website, and I would like to give credit to the writer of this. It had such a perfect description that I wanted to share it here, pretty much verbatim. Mada focuses on helping people heal from unconscious into consciousness. She's no nonsense, to the point, and completely and utterly practical. She does not spend a lot of time talking about problems, abstract concepts, and philosophies. Instead, she teaches people how they can practically and permanently alleviate the causes of their physical, mental, and emotional pain and suffering, and discover the peace and joy of their eternal being. Here is Mada Dalian, Part 1.
Oh, Mada, thanks so much for joining me on Unraveling Midlife. You've been on my list for quite some time, so it's really nice to be here talking with you. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Happy to be talking to you today.
Yeah, and I'm excited about sharing a bit about you and what you do with listeners, because I've been working with you for, I don't know, a few years, probably 5. And so can you maybe just tell listeners a bit about who you are, what you do?
Okay, well, that's who am I? It's a very complicated question to answer because I can only tell you what the who am I part, which is on this planet. The true who am I part, nobody can describe in words till you have the experience. So my personal journey started with exactly that intent, the main question: who am I? What am I doing here? Where do I come from? Where do I go when I die? Those are the questions that I asked when I was 5 years old. And obviously, when you start asking those questions, especially when you see death, and that's how it arose, the questions, suddenly you get the perspective of what's most important. Because once there's an awareness that this journey is temporary, my presence on the planet is temporary, then your identification with things that normally we get identified with drops, because then you see the reality. And when I say identification, most of the things we do here is part of the Many times spiritual teachers talk about the illusion, but it is the illusion. But why we're here is basically to help us to find the answers to those questions. Not about my profession, not about my personality, but who I truly am. So, and that's the journey that is sooner or later everybody will come to ask those questions, whether in their current life or in future lives. But everybody comes to that because there's the word called disillusionment, and people get disillusioned with the reality of life very often. The more disillusioned the person is, the more closer they come to the asking the real questions. And so my journey continued until very focused, until I had the experience that revealed that, and this is something that people don't understand when I say I am God, which means I'm not separate. I am God means I am the existence. We can say part of existence, which never disappears. Also realizing that the journey is the goal, there's no goal. All the goals are made out of the mind. So when the mind disappears, the goals disappear, and suddenly the truth is revealed. And it has to be a very focused search. Well, search for that question. Because life is so busy and we have so many leakages of energy, and we need the 100% energy to focus on that task. And even though the question is coming through the mind, you don't know till you see that it's coming from the mind. and that's the part where you see your ego, and then you see the fear of the ego to disappear and die and be a nobody. So that's the bridge that must be crossed for anybody to truly discover who they are. Not an easy task. Not an easy task, and that's why many people don't have the interest, or they feel it's too hard, or there's other priorities in life. But sooner or later, existence is very patient. Sooner or later, everybody will come to realize exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I know for me it's definitely like I'll be focused on it, and then I'll get pulled back into life, and then I'm like, oh, hang on, I'm not feeling fulfilled at all. You pulled back into like what's real and what's the thing that I need to focus on.
Yeah, and life always pushes you toward it. It always takes the rug out of your, from below your feet, and it's like, oops, suddenly you have a free fall, and you have to compose yourself and really start asking, oh, what is all this all about?
And how did that happen for you?
Well, for me, it was, I was fortunate that I saw my grandfather die when I was 5, and I realized I will be also dying one day. And life will continue regardless to whether I'm here, because life is continuing after he's dead. So that's that. And of course, when I say that, sooner or later, obviously it took me many lifetimes to get to this point also. And I've been a seeker for many lifetimes and missing many lifetimes, because you get identified with the fear of the ego to disappear. And that's a bridge. That's a very important step. So meditation helps to bring you closer to your being. Witnessing, learning to witness, learning to watch. That's how you disidentify from your attachments. And you have to let go of all your attachments, because attachments don't let you have that 100% focus. So that's why it's not an easy journey, and that's why it takes a long time. But we don't go anywhere. We're always here. So therefore, it doesn't matter. Everybody takes their own time.
Yeah, I can kind of sense people going, what? Relinquish all my attachments? But I like my attachments. Even if they can get to the point of thinking like that.
Yeah, but that's exactly the parts of attachments are what blocks people from knowing who they are. And when I say knowing who you are, basically through those attachments, then you are you're playing that game of one moment feeling insecure, next moment feeling, the ego is always like that. Either it feels wounded, feels sorry for itself, or it feels on top of the world, feels self-righteous. But how to see who am I versus what the mind is saying or doing? Who am I versus my emotions that are going up and down? Because anything I can watch is not me. So in our core, we're all the witness, and the witness sees what comes and goes. And to cultivate the witness, meditation is one of the tools, but that takes a very, very long time. And that's why my ways of working with people is very practical. That's why I devised the system that I devised. That's why I wrote the book In Search of Miraculous Healing into Consciousness, just to show those steps, and it's almost like giving people signposts so you don't get discouraged. And if you look at the world today, most people living sooner, this moment they're feeling great, next moment they're depressed. I don't know anyone who cannot feel depressed, because there's so many depressive things happen in the world.
Yeah, true. So the method that you have created, tell us a little bit about that, maybe a bit of the history.
How about I ask you a question? So you worked with the method. What was your experience?
Well, I know that I can surmise the method as a way that works with the innermost negative thought forms to get them out of the body, mind, to transform them. So that's basically my very short form of describing. But the method, it's not like anything I ever expected. It's this full body, it just uncovers all sorts of things that I didn't know were there. For example, you're talking about essentially everyone is afraid of death. And I didn't feel what my mind said, well, no, that's not me. I'm not afraid of death when I first came to this. And it took quite some time of working to go, oh, actually, that is there. And it's definitely a hard one to explain.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing that what we need to understand is every experience we have, starting from our childhood, creates a conclusion. So we have a conclusion about experiences. And when we have a conclusion about something, that becomes a belief. It's like a program that's then in the body, does not disappear. And then we continue living our life based on that belief. And the beliefs are connected with what? With the mind, because it's the mind that makes conclusions. And the moment of birth, everybody goes through that process of birth. Everybody's experience is different, just as every mother's experience is different. But then one thing there's common thread: every child is being pushed out of the mother's womb. So when you get pushed out of something that you were comfortable in, and suddenly you're being pushed to this unknown world, the first fear arises in that moment. Fear of the unknown, fear of disappearing, fear of survival. And then that's already imprinted in the body. And no matter how much people mentally think they're not afraid of death, that fear is already imprinted in the body. So therefore, it's the awareness of what is the fear connected to, being thrown out into the unknown. And that, if people really connect with that fear, that is the base of why people don't like to go too much into it, and they'd rather, do things to divert their focus from that fear of the unknown. But fear of the unknown creates what? Fear of making mistakes comes from that. What will happen if I make mistakes? It's the unknown. What will happen if I say something that I'm thinking I'll be criticized? That's also a fear of the unknown. If I lose a job, how I'm going to survive? That's a fear of unknown. Every step of the way, anything we do is connected with the fear of the unknown. So therefore, what is the fear of the unknown? In its nutshell, it's the fear to disappear and the fear to die. But then when we don't know who we truly are, in other words, when we don't know that and this is not intellectually that person needs to know. Intellectual knowing is just 10%, and it doesn't go too far. You need to experience, you need to see from inside that I can never die, that I am eternal. And that's how you know who you are. Once you see that I am eternal, I can never die. But then how to come to see that? You need to take a risk. You need to keep watching the mind and the ego. So then you see the ego and you say, okay, now I see that it's the ego that is afraid to die and disappear. It's got nothing to do with me, with who I truly am. Because I'm here eternally. But then all the conditionings we have, all the beliefs we have, religious conditionings we have, collective conditionings of fear that we have to neutralize death, so nobody sees it, nobody talks about it. So all that prevents us from really knowing who we are. But everything is like, no matter what you do, if you really start exploring, you will see it's connected with the fear of the unknown. And why is my method so powerful is that because it allows people, and you said things come up you weren't even thinking. Well, because it works with the unconscious, what's in the body repressed. Every thought that you repress, every fear you repress since your childhood, the emotions that you repress, they're all in your body. Whatever is repressed is unlived in the body. So this method allows for all these repressions to be expressed, to come up to the surface. It works with what's in the unconscious. It works with those beliefs. It allows for those beliefs to be verbalized, expressed, released, using breath out loud verbal expression. But it also works with the whole body, not just one area. Works with the whole body, the chakra system, the mind, the emotions, and inner consciousness, because consciousness is what heals. That's why the book, In Search of the Miraculous, Healing into Consciousness, because once you're fully conscious, that's where you know who you are and you're absolutely free. Then you cannot, even if you wanted to, you cannot compromise your inner truth. Freedom means I have no fears of people's judgments, people's criticism. I have no fears to make mistakes, because I understand every time I make a mistake, I learn something. If I don't make a mistake, how can I learn? So then your intelligence starts to grow. And this is the thing. From very childhood, we don't have it in our education system, and every child is afraid to make mistakes. Every child is taught to compare. So, and you see it in the classroom, one child is doing well in math, you're not so good, and then you start thinking, well, I'm not good enough, I can't do this. Well, but you're good enough in some other things, that the other person is not good enough. Everybody has their own unique gifts that they've developed over lifetimes. and their gifts are developed based on people's interests. So how did I create the method? Because my interest has been always exploring a human condition. And with understanding the human condition and having transformed, having jumped through that fear of death that the ego is creating, and saying today is a good day to die, that's how you jump across that line and see that, wait a minute, I didn't die, and actually I found the whole universe. and that's my true home. But you'd have to take the risk. But most people are so afraid on little mistakes, afraid of what others are going to say. So based on the combination of things, exploring human condition, having the interest very early on, and because I've been exploring my own mind, how it works, and then exploring the body and the gift that I had, being able to read thoughts in people's energies. So all that combination and working with people allowed me to come to see that there's actually there's a system that is being developed, and the system works for everyone. And the system is bringing people into the unconscious, allowing the unconscious to come to the surface, releasing it like the clouds, and then using the qualities of the third eye, for example, the sixth chakra, because we're working with all the chakras. Every chakra has its own quality. And I think you wanted to talk about that, which is described in the In Search of Miraculous. So those qualities of the chakras need to be absolutely in their natural state. If you're afraid of your sex and sexuality, your chakra is blocked, and everything else following that will be blocked. And how these things get blocked based on the dogmas and based on what your parents before your parents, the whole society has been conditioned with. So how to break through all that? It's difficult. That's why with this method it becomes so much easier, because you don't have to make the mental effort. And when you're working, you don't use your mind. Things come up on their own. You just follow the instructions, and then suddenly you have an aha moment, and that's where you connect to your consciousness. And once you've seen something you haven't been seeing before, that's the absolute and total shift, and therefore you cannot go back. And then the whole body follows. The whole body starts shifting because the program has been erased out of the body's cellular memory.
It's a pretty incredible gift that you had that allowed you to create the method, being able to see people's thought forms.
That was very helpful, yes, because
how did that start? Was that from as a child as well?
Yeah, ability as a child. So how do we develop our abilities? Like I said, through lifetimes. And that's why we can't copy anyone. We just need to find our own, what is my calling? And that's another part of education system that's missing. That's why children grow up and they're so confused and become confused adults and confused and unhappy adults. And that's why there's drugs, that's why there's alcohol, that's why there's diversions, because people haven't found their inner joy. And it's there. Inner joy is always there. And you know what it's connected to? It's connected with creativity. Every time you're creative, you feel the joy. Every time you create something, the mind stops. And that's why I say, when we say God is the creator, well, we are the creator. That's why you are God. Every single person is. We're not separate. And we do create like God. Once all these human conditionings are out of the way, and then you see that the whole universe is made of joy. Because creativity never ends.
It's interesting. I've been thinking about creativity on and off, but it came up in a conversation. It's like creativity, that's such a word that has so much scope. Like some people might define creativity by knitting or playing music, but creativity is so much more than that. It's everything.
But that's exactly creativity, when you're really doing what your soul is, what you've developed, what your soul is longing to live. That's any little thing. Even you're cooking a new meal, it's a creative process. As long as you're not doing it with that, the heavy feelings like, oh, I don't want to do this. Well, if you don't want to do something you're doing, you're not being creative. Creativity always connects with what you want to do, and you're doing what you like to do. And thank God for that, because otherwise life will be so boring and so there will be no joy, basically. And the more a person does what they like to do, the more they feel that inner joy, the happier they are.
I guess that's part of the reason I keep doing this podcast.
There we go. And in those moments where you enjoy it, there is no mind. You're just feeling that joy that's happening inside.
Yeah. Love that word, joy. The feelings that conjures up.
Yeah, because in those moments, you don't have to fit into somebody's expectations. You don't have to, your mind is not working extra hard, being worried about something. All those things connected to the ego.
Yeah, and
that's why
that's what the method does. It just strips off those layers.
Basically it helps you see the ego and transform it. And as you know, the 7 stages of ego's development, ego consciousness development, described in Search of Miraculous. So that's the first book that I wrote that took me 7 years. The method was written, developed, recorded afterwards. But both are very connected, both are needed, because there's more understanding you have, the more you take the time to practically work with the method in that process of transformation.
Yeah, there is so much in both of those books.
And the more you work, you realize that the more you work, you get more empowered. You start feeling more strength.
Yeah.
And how do you feel more strength? As I say, the wounded ego, which is always feeling weak and insecure, so that's the ego that needs to be transformed first into the healthy ego. And before you can drop the ego, you can't just drop the ego when you have a lot of fears and wounds inside. And therefore, it's a process. You have to go through the process of strengthening your ego. There's no problem with the ego. It's there for a reason.
What would you say to there's some schools of thought that say, well, the ego helps you do your day-to-day activity, so you don't actually want to drop it. What would you say to that?
You can do your day-to-day activities being present. What ego does, it's a very tricky thing. Well, first of all, the purpose of the ego is like a shell that protects the body. And it protects you against all the other egos that and we know how egos work. I want what you have, so I'm gonna, I'm gonna do whatever I can so there's no consideration in that kind of a selfish ego. We call it selfish narcissistic ego. Well, that needs to have some, it needs to develop to understand that I have the ego in order to take care and protect myself, but I have no right to go and interfere in somebody else's life. So that's a more mature ego, and we need to come to that place. And if we don't come to that place, we just stay immature, and we stay basically, we stay thinking that I'm I'm important. Because what does ego do? Ego thinks, well, I'm the most important person on this planet and everybody has to serve me. Which is a big illusion. it's There's so many people here, and even parents get caught because their parents were caught thinking, well, I'm your parent, so you're supposed to do what I tell you because I know better. But that's another illusion, because the child who is born could be more advanced soul than the parent.
Mm.
So that ego is people need to start understanding and watching how to help the child grow and mature and be independent, take responsibility for themselves. You have to let them, you have to understand, first of all, it's a fellow traveler, just happened to be my child in this lifetime. Because when your parent dies, you have no clue where your parent came from or is going to. All you know is the identification that you have created throughout your lifetime. And then it disappears, and the soul continues their journey. That's why if you know that ahead of time, if you start understanding these things, you will have better relationships with your parents, with friends, with intimate relationships, because then you wouldn't be demanding or blaming or expecting.
I'm just thinking in the back of my mind, astrology is coming up because that's what this podcast is loosely based on. And I remember parents wanting their children to have this perfect life, and the teacher said everyone has a chiron in their chart, which is the wound, the healer, the things that we're here to learn. And from a greater perspective, we're all here on our own soul journey, and we don't necessarily know what other people's are, and we live and
Exactly. And then those prides, for example, when I was born, Chiron was at the rising.
Oh yeah.
So the wounded healer. So of course I had to go through my own process. My parents were divorced when I was 7. In a way, I was left on my own, but then I also had an abusive stepmother. So all these things, everything that happens, there is a reason for the soul, whatever's happening in their life. And when you really dig in and you really look deeper, I know for myself when I started exploring that, so why did I have to get abused by this woman? Of course, there's things I have no control over as a child. So what your father is doing in his own journey, what he's doing in his, relationships. But then in a way, I saw that it had to happen because my soul wanted to find my own way without anybody interfering. And it happened exactly like that. My father had no time. He was busy working. Stepmother basically had she didn't care. Basically, she just threw her steam whenever she was frustrated. I was the one to get beat up. But nobody was there to give me any direction. I had to find it myself. So that's the quality that I think it helped me when I was developing the method. And that's the quality that helped me, thankfully. When I was 5, I had that awareness to I need to know who I am. And thankfully, I had a grandmother who, in my younger years, when my parents were divorced, so she lived with us, and she was a very important person for me because she basically pointed out when I asked her that there is no God. And I challenged her to show me God if there is one. She said, God is within you, within every human being, everywhere you see, everything you see around you. So that was a wisdom that uh, uh, if I could say anything that helped me in my childhood to stay in my strength and my healthy ego state was my grandmother. Because we need to make sure that our children don't, if they see parents who feel that they're wounded, if they see parents who are insecure, well, they'll learn through that. And this is how it is. But nothing wrong with it. The only thing is that if we had the right education early on for children, doesn't matter what kind of family a child comes from. If the education was to help children find their strength and find their calling instead of comparing themselves to other children, then we'll have a better society who will be self-responsible. But how many people you see that are taking responsibility for themselves fully? It's somebody didn't do something that I wanted them to do. It's somebody else's fault. But that's nonsense, a waste of energy, and it's just that closes the heart for everyone.
But everyone has that ability to do the work on themselves. And I mean, you mentioned children. I mean, your method is also children can.
There is a version for children and teens. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's...
And they're so fast. They're very quick. Their intelligence is still intact.
Hasn't been beaten out of them by life yet.
They haven't been beat up by life. Yes. Yeah, and they're still fresh from, there's still some consciousness there when they just come into this planet and start getting identified with things, and then start having experiences. Then all these layers start accumulating of beliefs and conditionings.
Yeah, I'm just thinking the sense of seeing a baby. I saw a baby yesterday. I was just like, that the wisdom and the innocence and wisdom together in the eyes is.
Yeah, and yet, of course, we need that life in order to mature. So if you take child's awareness, they put everything in their mouth. Right? Anything. So play with sand and put it in your mouth. So yes, that innocence is there, but then the maturity, the understanding how to live on the planet comes with experiencing life on the planet, because it's different. You have to learn certain things when you live on the planet, certain things that are beneficial and
yes, like
or are not beneficial.
To call the daycare to say, please keep my son out of the sand pit, because he'd been eating so much sand out of the sand pit he was constipated.
Yeah, and this is the thing. So unfortunately, parents are so busy, right? They have to work, and it's not that often that a parent has the time to be 24/7 with their child.
Oh, yeah. And I guess in the olden days, and there's many of them, there was more of that, people not living in like nuclear individuality, that there was more of a village kind of feel with, I mean, your grandmother lived with you, so she was around when you were young.
Yes, and yes. So there's, if we go into that, we're going to talk forever. There's so many things.
We don't have to go into that.
There's so many things to understand. Yes.
Yeah, there are. Well, that said, we do have a lot of other stuff that we're planning on talking about over the coming episodes. So to wrap up this first episode together, how can people find you?
Well, the website is there, madadalian.com.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes so people
and there's some videos there. There's a lot of information. I'm told my website has too much information. So yes, but I like to give people as much information as possible so they can explore, just because I like exploring.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so they can see what's available, the books, the recordings, the online courses.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And keep tuned in, coming up for more depth and more discussions that I find really inspiring. So thank you very much, Mada. We'll see you next time.
That's great. Okay, thank you for having me.
Welcome to the music section of the show. Today's music is from a live performance at the Wallace Arts Trust in Auckland, New Zealand, with a song about my experience with being around an awake teacher. As I told the audience that day, I tend to share live recordings so that I don't get caught up in the perfectionism of having the piece of music good enough to share. Although it was written a while ago, this was its first outing in public, and its second outing is here. Putting it on the internet so anyone can listen, assuming that they can burrow deeply enough to find it in the maze that is the World Wide Web. Congratulations for getting this far. Here is Wonder.
Feel
Unraveling Midlife is brought to you from Aotearoa, New Zealand by www.sarahmarlowspence.com. Theme music is by Sarah Marlowe Spence and Saraswati Marie Willis, and art by Samantha Hepburn.